My name is Elliot Miles McKinley. I am a composer and host of a web show called Composers at Home, Maybe Drinking Coffee. I am also the director of the Alba Music Festival Composition Program in Alba, Italy, which runs every year, concurrent with the Alba Music Festival, the end of May into early June. Unfortunately, this year, due to COVID-19, we had to postpone and cancel our program. However, the Alba Music Festival is continuing in a smaller online format for 2020. I am very happy to contribute several video programs for this year's online festival to represent the composition program, featuring recent and current performers, faculty, and several of the chosen 2020 composition fellows. For this installment, I draw from the archive of Composers at Home, Maybe Drinking Coffee, with an episode featuring the 2017 composer-in-residence Lansing McLoskey. As with any of the episodes of Composers at Home, Maybe Drinking Coffee, Lansing will talk a little bit about his musical journey, his thought process on composition, and we will hear some of his more recent music. There he is. There's Lansing. Good evening. Yes, the studio audience, as it were, is filtering on in. Just like last week, I will be looking over here, and I'm not ignoring Lansing when I do that. That's because on this screen I have access to the questions that could be asked on Facebook and YouTube. So if I'm peek over there, I am trying to check and see if there are any questions that'll come in. So one of the first things I ask guests in a more roundabout way, but I can ask you in a sort of direct way, is, well, what got you into this music thing in the first place? You know, what, you know, you were, so where were you born? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Cupertino, California.
What drew you to music? We'll get to what drew you to be a composer, which is an even weirder aspect of music, but you know what?
I would, oh boy. Okay. You know, my parents were both musicians, or musical, should I say. My dad played sax all through, his youth and in college, bands. And my mom minored in piano in college. And that was really because in that era, you didn't, in Fresno, California, you didn't major in music, especially if you majored in education. So that's what she did, and minored in piano performance. So they were both musical, but oddly enough, growing up, I mean, they just never listened to music. But they had a record collection.
Yeah.
So at some point early on, my grandmother tells the story of me putting some classical record on my toy record player and playing it at 78, and then going nuts. So in my teenage years, I started browsing through the record collection, I begged for guitar lessons at 6, and my mom said, well, not until you have piano lessons. And I said, okay, then give me piano lessons. And they didn't until I was 11. And then I only took 4 years of piano, and I burned through 5 teachers in 4 years.
Wow.
So I quit piano at 14. when I bought a $15 electric guitar at the flea market, and learned bar chords, and then it was
kind of
rock and roll.
Off to the races.
It was rock and roll.
Yeah.
And then I didn't get into, you and I have had several conversations just in recent past week or so about Miles and Sinatra and so forth, but also over the years about jazz. But the funny thing is, I didn't get into jazz until I got into punk rock. A friend of mine was going to loan me. I asked him to borrow the Circle Jerks first album, 1981. It was probably 82. So he brought it over and he gave me two other records. He gave me the Circle Jerks, which, by the way, is brilliant.
Yeah.
And then he also gave me ESP, Miles, and Weather Report, Heavy Weather. He said, hey, you should check these out.
Right.
I'd never listened to any jazz. My parents had some jazz records. I didn't give them a listen. I listened to those two records and I mean,
right.
It was like when I discovered Jimi Hendrix or Sex Pistols. I mean, it was like, wow.
Yeah. So your piano lessons, it was just, were you not drawn to the instrument, or was it just, I mean, I don't want you to throw any teachers under the bus.
No. As soon as I started way too late. I mean, I rag on my mom today. She still feels guilty, but no, once I started piano, I mean, I really took off. And the reason I went through 5 teachers is because I don't want to.
Sure. I know.
It's just like they couldn't keep up. I was just like, okay, I've had this teacher for, months. They've bored. They've got nothing for me. Next.
Yeah. Right.
So that was it. I had years of playing music in punk bands, and started taking music theory at the community college, and electronic music. Patch bays and oscillators and tapes, because I was into alternative and punk rock, and I thought, hey, maybe music theory will help me write better songs. I mean, and then when I eventually decided to pursue music, I was playing in this punk band. We wrote this punk opera and had recorded in the studio. And I thought, oh, this is it. I'm gonna be
this is right.
a rock star.
Right.
And then I just dropped everything and I served a mission for my church in Denmark. Then it was when I decided I'm going to be a concert pianist.
Wow. I don't think you ever told me that. That's an element of the McLoskey background that I do not know.
I applied to music school. I showed up. I moved back to the States, and within a week later, I was auditioning for the piano faculty with nothing memorized. So while all the piano faculty sitting out in the room, and I said, "Well, I don't have anything memorized. I haven't had a piano lesson at that point in 8 years. I haven't even really had regular access to a piano for a year and a half." And they should have just kicked me out of the room. Come on,
right away.
This is utterly preposterous. I don't know. I was, what I was thinking, but instead they kind of looked at each other and was like, "Okay, well, what do you have?" And I said, "Well, I have some Bach, and I have the first movement of the Pathétique." Not memorized, but I played the Beethoven, I played the Bach, and they kicked me out of the room, and they brought me back. I don't know. It was pretty shortly. And they said, "Well, look, we can't accept you as a piano major."
Right.
But the chair of the department, Betty Oberacher, who's quite renowned American pianist, said she heard something in my playing, accepted. She said, "We want to accept you into the College of Creative Studies. Take piano for a semester, re-audition." That semester, I heard the Rite of Spring for the first time and Barrio Symphonia. And then it was like, goodbye, piano.
Right.
I didn't know that music existed.
Right.
I mean, when I heard Symphonia and the Rite of Spring, I was like, okay, this is what I've been searching for my whole life. I mean, this is punk rock, but it's way more. This is everything. I have to do this. I don't know what it is. I don't know how to do it. I've never composed. Yeah. But this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just felt like I had no choice.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Stravinsky, the Rite of Spring, does tend to appeal to those who are either into metal or into punk. I mean, that's a great piece to introduce someone who's never really experienced that to who otherwise would be really into like I said, the heavy metal and the punk and everything like this. So it doesn't surprise me that your ears were drawn to Stravinsky.
Yeah, of course. I mean, and I was also, by that time, I was like bored with punk and so into all that proto-goth. I mean, we didn't call it goth, but Public Image Limited and The Cure and Bauhaus and Susie and the Banshees and industrial music like Einstürzende Neubauten and Throbbing Gristle. And so there's something about that too. Yeah. The other, there's something that's dark and dissonant and different and but also profoundly beautiful and even spiritual and yeah. And the same semester, by the way, I had to be in some performance ensemble. I didn't play any orchestral instrument. So day one, I was wandering around and some guy said, "Hey, there's a choir rehearsing in that room right there." Okay. I'd sung choir in high school. So I walked in and it turned out it was the Capella Cordina, conducted by Alejandro Planchart, the medieval and Renaissance choir at UC Santa Barbara. So I had no idea. I'd never heard that music. And I heard Jacopo da Bologna in the first day of class. And so I was like, that was equal. I mean, it was just that
was equally profound for you.
Equally profound. And I ended up, as you know, I spent 20 years as an early music singer and conductor after that. We obviously, you and I have very different trajectories, but it's interesting that our ears, and this is also common with other composers too. This is like, I don't have enough empirical data to make a case, but I have circumstantial evidence to suggest that a lot of composers tend to they gravitate towards those polarities. Oh yeah, more often than not. And I don't know what's there to be learned, but I just find it really fascinating. And you and I had some similar level of conversation when we met each other. We were kind of commiserating, I think, about that, talking about other things. So, your inundation in that and on either sides of the common practice period totally makes sense. In that semester, that was when you said, "I'm going to be a composer," or did you sort of like, did you know kind of what that was a little bit? No, nothing. Okay. No. I mean, in all the punk bands and experimental bands that I played in, I wrote most of the music because, once you learn a bar chord and you start playing a few Black Flag and Ramones songs, it doesn't take long before you realize I can do this. Right. So yeah, I had written music in that way. But no, I had when I decided to be a composer, I didn't even know how to do it or what that meant. So I just registered for class composition and started from like 0.0 at the age of 22. So and here's the thing, and I tell my students this, man. I said, most of you people, you are so far ahead where I was at your stage.
Yeah, right.
At your age.
Yeah.
But I don't know. In a way, my coming to it so late and knowing nothing and knowing that I knew nothing turned out, I think, to really be, I don't know if it's an asset, but it really lit a fire. So I knew immediately, like, I don't know, Jack. So I was just, hungry.
Yeah.
So I was still playing in bands, but Friday nights and every free moment I had, I was in the listening room at the library. This is card catalog days, right?
Yeah.
Just checking out everything I could, mostly early music and anything. I would just I've never even heard of this composer. Who is this? Jevsky. Who is this? Penderecki. Who is this?
Right.
So I was just checking out scores and records, and just going to the listening library with stacks of stuff and making cassettes. And, I was glued to a skateboard in those whole years. I mean, you can see maybe that was a huge part of my life, which we don't have to get into. And I would just skateboard around and go to the beach and be listening to, Ligeti or Hindemith or whatever. I mean, I was just it was all.
Yeah. 95% of being a composer is listening.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
The other 5%, the craft, orchestration, all that garbage theory. Yeah. But that's the 5% that actually can be taught. The other 95% is doing exactly the kinds of things that we did, like what you did, which is just, grab a score, grab a record, whatever, even no score, just grab a record or a CD or whatever, and just listen. Just put, fill.
Man, I preach.
This is what my old man used to say. He used to say, know everything so you know what to reject and what to accept.
Oh my God, yeah, that's words of wisdom, man. And Bernard Franz, that's one of his mantras too. He says, "You have to know your history," and he says, "There's no shortcuts."
What was if you have a moment or a piece that you felt you had finally written something that represented something of yourself? Because we all, when we're younger, and I'm assuming the same way, we kind of regurgitate a lot of the stuff that we're listening to. We read a lot of
course, yeah.
I hate the term derivative, but we do write a lot of pieces that sort of, as we filter stuff through, we write pieces that sound like Stravinsky or Ravel or whatever. But the piece that kind of, for you, or maybe the moment when you felt like you, as a composer, you had gotten to a point where you could start expressing yourself.
I have one piece. I was still an undergrad, and my first, and to date only, I'm supposed to be writing a string quartet, but that's
another story.
It's another story. But I wrote a string quartet as a senior, and all my other pieces for undergrad are, what's the term? They're removed from the catalog.
Right.
They're not available pieces. So that's my one piece where I felt like, okay, there's one movement that's pretty Ligeti esque, too much. But the sound, the harmonies, the gestures, balance of music that's static and melodic writing. I listen to that piece and I go, that's still me. That is still me. And so that's the one piece that I felt, even though I was young, I felt like I had turned a corner and started to be me. I do, plunk at the piano, but I sing everything. I mean, if I'm writing a solo violin piece, I sing it. If I'm writing a chamber ensemble or a reed quintet, I sing everything. So I'm constantly at the keyboard singing.
Yes.
So even in my instrumental music, as I said, I also, I keep on telling people that I'm not a set theory person. And yet, I wonder if there's some denial there, because I have found that once I discovered that in my music, then it really opened up. It became such a powerful tool for me. So there is a lot of, set theory kind of stuff, or set approach to harmony and melody in my music. And I'm also, my choral, my ear, I mean, it's not coming from Morton Lordson and Eric Whitaker.
Yeah.
It's coming from Ockeghem and Landini and Dufay and Chiconia and Machaut.
Yeah.
And I think that does. There's it sounds like a stupid term, but I often describe my own harmony and melodies as neo-modal, but not in the way that you would normally think. Like I'm not using a mode.
Yeah, right.
Because there is a sort of neo-modality, I think, about it.
Your point about singing is wonderful, because I do the same thing even if I'm not aware that I'm doing it. And it is something that when I teach composition, and especially those composers or the students who take to it and really start to run with it, I say, the music comes from here, and I can't point low enough because the camera's on, but it comes from here, and where it comes from here is it comes out through your voice. Right? It comes through your voice. A really great exercise for composers, and I don't know if you've ever given an exercise like this, is to take a piece of music, have a student write out, find the main line that traces through any piece of music, and sing that line as you're copying it out by hand. It gets away from what I call finger music. When you're singing the lines, you're not doing finger music. And what finger music is where everything is here, but it's not here. And it's connecting the here to the here, and the whole process. So, yeah, I guess for something completely different, or not completely different, in some ways. All right, so I'm going to queue up the Score to playlist here, and we'll meet back when we're done listening. You know what's remarkable about maybe it was the way it was recorded, but maybe it was also the way that you blended some of the instruments. But aside of some individual colors, the blending of these instruments made it sound almost like it was like kind of like a super saxophone. It was like this sort of saxophone quintet that wasn't a saxophone quintet, but it sounded so many times it was like, no, that's not. Is that an English horn? It was the soprano saxophone. Did you notice that?
First of all, English horn. I mean, come on.
Right.
I'm an alto instrument fan, so give me a viola over violin any day.
Right.
English horn over oboe, alto flute over C flute. I mean, etc.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew it had to be English horn. And I mean, it's funny that you said like it sounded like a super sax quintet or something. I mean, there's a lot of super sax in there.
Yeah.
Sax. I kind of left that out. The one jazz record that I knew inside and out when I was in junior high was Super Sax Plays Bird, and the sound of bebop and transcribed for like incredible that sax ensemble.
Yeah.
That's been in my ear for forever. So it's good that you caught that.
Yeah.
There's definitely that.
Like the music that you're in now, or do you feel like you're moving in a kind of a direction that might be going away from it or expanding? I guess I'm trying to find out kind of where you think you might be musically and where you might want to go.
That is a tough question. Interesting to think about. I mean, okay, so I'm going to answer it with kind of maybe in a slightly scattered way.
Mm-hmm.
This is nothing like what I'm writing now. I'm finishing up a 90-minute opera for Guerrilla Opera in Boston,
mm-hmm.
And that is really a very contrasting vocabulary, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
This piece in particular, I feel was a culmination of ideas, gestures, sounds that I had been working with back and forth for several years.
Mm-hmm.
I have several other instrumental pieces that have sort of isms that are similar. And this piece, I felt like, is the culmination of that, which means that I don't really envision myself writing another piece like that.
Right.
So
You kind of got into that.
I have a sax quartet, in fact, that has some, elements which kind of show up in the piece. And I've got a couple of other chamber pieces.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really feel like, okay, this is the piece that does what I want in that sound world of rhythm and melody and triadic harmony. The triadic harmony that's in this piece and the sets harmony. I wanted to be able to seamlessly merge with chromatic clusters.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And I didn't want them to be heard as juxtapositions, but as that. And then having, these kind of soaring lyrical melodies. And I okay, well, now I've done it. So what am I going to do it again? So I really feel like, this string quartet and this, I'm supposed to be writing a violin concerto this summer. I have to do something different.
So Colin has a question. So his question is, from your own experiences, how do you balance musical invention and development with pacing and expectation? Oftentimes, something that may, quote, feel, unquote, good may come off as monotonous and vice versa.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. This comes up in composition lessons all the time. This is something I think about a lot. I mean, proportions and pacing. I mean, crap. Yeah. That is something that is just so hard to teach. It's so hard to understand, and it's way overlooked, and it doesn't show up in any orchestration book or any composition book. Show me a composition textbook that deals with portions and pacing. I feel like this is one of the most important elements of music. And I can't tell you what works in terms of proportion and pacing, but I know when it's right and I know when it's wrong. Yeah, not only music, hopefully, but in others. So, but how often have you sat in a concert or in a composition lesson and you listen to a piece and you go, that went on too long, or actually more often than not, it's like I wanted 90 more seconds of that.
Yeah. What did you do with that idea? That was good. Yeah. Where did that go?
Where'd it go? So yeah, one of the things that I'm really interested in, however, and I think it shows up in this piece, is playing with expectations and non-traditional trajectories. So, the form of this piece and the way that it unfolds and the proportions are actually weird. It doesn't really make sense on paper.
Right.
I compose, I can't say all, but mostly on paper. And I'm just a firm believer in laying it all out on the floor. And I think that walking through a piece, well, almost literally walking, but walking through it with your eyes and your ears, playing it can really give you a sense of proportion and pacing that you cannot get staring at Finale or Sibelius on your laptop. I don't care who you are.
Yeah.
You just can't. So even if I write a piece wholly in the computer, I'm in a rush. I still print those pages out. I print out the hard copy and lay them out, because you cannot see a 6 or a 13-minute piece on your screen. And so there's no way to digest and understand how time is working and experiential time, Kramer-esque.
For me, I will walk. I will take a walk and will play, like even before I've written any notes down. I will walk ideas out, and I will imagine the performance. I'll imagine myself in the audience and imagine the physicality, the gestures, the players on the stage. Like I'll do my own little sort of like with a drone and zoom around and and then I'll do what you do. I'll do it with literal sheets of paper, or just sketches and lay them out. And I know, and I'll conduct and sing at the same time.
I compose 90% of the time with my eyes closed. Mm-hmm. And I am, for two reasons. One is I don't have the ear that maybe other composers that you think that I have, or I really compose in gesture, not pitch. And so I close my eyes and I can hear/see the music. Yeah, and right. Go back and find what those notes are. But also, just like you, I compose with my eyes closed because always I'm in the 10th row.
Yeah.
I don't care if it's a solo flute or an orchestra or an opera or a choral piece. I am always looking at the ensemble performing my music on stage, because I really believe I don't write music for CD. I write it for live performance, and it's not. I mean, yes, it's notes and rhythms, and that's
sure. Yeah.
But it's also what is happening. What does it look like? What does it feel? I'm always considering the physical, the experience, the motion, even sort of body language of performance. Yeah. What is this melody? What does it sound like? That's most important. But what does it look like? What does it look like as it's being? Yeah. So, I'm absolutely with you.
Yeah. Lansing, this was really wonderful. A real pleasure to spend some time with you.
Thank you for having me. Really.
You're welcome. Once again, I wish to thank my guest from the April 23rd episode of Composers at Home, Maybe Drinking Coffee, Lansing McLoskey. I would also like to thank Jeff Soberschlag, Giuseppe Nova, and the entire staff of the Alba Music Festival Composition Program for making this festival such a warm and welcoming place for all of our program fellows, faculty, and guest artists over these past 5 years. We look forward to next year when we surely hope we can all be together again in person as part of the 18th edition of the Alba Music Festival and the 6th edition of the Composition Program. 2021 is set to be a great year for the program and will feature Hub New Music as the ensemble in residence, along with Hannah Lash as the composer in residence. Our distinguished faculty includes Mary Ellen Childs, David Post, and J. Anthony Allen, who will also run an electronic and electroacoustic mini course that will run concurrently with the composition program. Guest artists will include jazz guitarist and composer Barry Finnerty, who recorded with Miles Davis and was a founding member of the Brecker Brothers Band. Musicologist and guitarist Enrico Merlin, who is one of the leading Miles Davis scholars, will visit as well, and composer and multidisciplinary instrumentalist Alex Lubet, who is professor of composition at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities, will attend and give several lectures. Applications will open later in the summer of 2020. Please visit www.albacomposition.com for more information. Also, visit our page on Facebook /Alba Composition and Instagram @Alba Composition. We thank you very much for taking the time to watch today's program, and we wish all of you to remain happy, healthy, and safe.